Foot Mystics. The Foot Clan wears a costume of ancient Japanese warrior tradition, but look past the mask and you'll find something that has no business being there at all. A clan founded in feudal Japan by warriors of the Ninja Tribunal, including the original Oroku Saki, born out of ninjutsu and disciplined martial practice, also turned its back on every conventional understanding of power and reached for something darker. That contradiction, warriors who dabble in the occult, is exactly what makes the Foot Mystics the most unsettling subgroup in the entire roster. The Foot Clan made its first published appearance in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in May 1984, and from that very first issue, the writing was already on the wall. The original Mirage comics didn't introduce the Mystics right away, but the foundation was unmistakable. This was a clan that practiced black magic alongside ninjutsu, two entirely separate disciplines cobbled together under a single banner. Led by Shredder with Karai as second in command, the Foot Clan operated as a criminal empire across New York, and its occult ties were never treated as an anomaly. They were treated as a feature. The occult connection isn't isolated to one continuity, and the IDW comics featured their own version of the Foot Mystics. The Mystics represent the persistent supernatural undercurrent in a franchise that keeps trying to explain the Foot Clan through the lens of street crime and corporate conspiracy. The turn comes when you ask what happens when you actually combine black magic with ninjutsu. This isn't a ninja who knows a few tricks, it's a practitioner operating on an entirely different axis of threat. One that physics and conventional combat training can't address. That specific blend is what the Foot Mystics embody, and it's why they've survived across decades of reboots and continuity resets. Characters get redesigned, origins get rewritten, universes get rebooted, but the mysticism persists, and people keep conflating them with other mystical elements in the TMNT universe. Karai's occasional magical abilities, Shredder's demonic armor, supernatural weapons, those are all separate phenomena attributed to specific characters or artifacts at specific moments. The Foot Mystics are the clan's dedicated sorcerer class, not a side effect of someone else's power boost. They exist as a standalone tradition within the Foot Clan's supernatural elements. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which Foot Clan member you think was the most dangerous. Let's get back into it. Foot Tech Ninja. Where the Foot Mystics drew their power from ancient black magic, the Foot Tech Ninja got their upgrade from a laboratory. These are cybernetically enhanced foot soldiers introduced in the 2003 series, representing the Foot Clan's answer to a problem that magic couldn't solve. The Turtles kept winning. The cybernetic armor makes Foot Tech Ninjas faster and stronger than regular Foot Ninja on every measurable metric, and it shows. Their specialized stealth armor lets them become seemingly invisible in combat, a trick that transforms a standard ninja ambush into something the Turtles can't track or counter. Baxter Stockman created the Foot Tech Ninjas by studying an unusual artifact, granting them enhanced strength and abilities such as turning invisible. They aren't organic foot soldiers who happen to get an upgrade. They were commissioned as a specific tactical solution designed around the Turtles' particular capabilities. Stockman also built related cybernetic variants alongside them. The Foot Tech Ninja weren't a one-off experiment. They were the leading edge of a complete restructuring of the Foot Clan from a martial organization into a technological one. A Foot Tech Ninja toy was released in 2003, the same year the character debuted, making it part of a deliberate cross-media rollout that treated the cybernetic foot soldier as a flagship figure rather than background color. The Foot Tech Ninja also appears in video games, extending the Foot Tech Ninja's reach into interactive media and cementing the cybernetic subgroup as a standalone entity rather than disposable mooks. Here's where the question becomes unavoidable. If the Foot Clan already had magic, black magic specifically, the kind the Mystics wielded, why switch to cybernetics? The ordinary explanation is that Stockman pushed it, that Saki greenlit it as a practical upgrade, and that the ninjas themselves had no say. And all of that is true. But it leaves something out. The condition that would have to hold for the in-universe explanation to be the full story is this. The Foot Clan would have to see cybernetics as compatible with its identity, not a betrayal of it. The evidence says they did. Stockman built a cybernetic army, Saki commissioned it, and the Foot Clan absorbed it into its standard roster alongside invisible cloak ninjas and scuba variants without any depicted institutional resistance. What the facts force is this. The Foot Clan's transition from occult warriors to cybernetically enhanced soldiers wasn't a fall from grace or a corruption. It was a deliberate pivot, executed by Stockman and accepted by Saki, that redefined what the Foot Clan actually was. The Mystics proved the clan's supernatural reach. The Foot Tech Ninja proved its technological reach. And the Turtles had to fight both. Hun. If the Foot Tech Ninja exists to be picked up and put down in a fighting game, Hun exists to be felt. In the 2003 series, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 3, released in August 2003, Hun hit the page and immediately stood apart from every masked foot soldier filling the background. Few humans among the Foot Clan are as physically strong as Hun. That raw strength, layered with brutality and a short temper, transforms him from a strong man into a genuinely dangerous weapon, the kind of enforcer whose hits land before you hear him approach. And he's not just muscle. In the 2003 series, Hun leads the Purple Dragons, a rival street gang, while simultaneously advancing Foot Clan interests and seeking to expand both his territory and his influence across New York's criminal landscape. That's the contradiction worth sitting with. He commands a crew outside the Foot while answering to Shredder, and both organizations are stronger for it. Here's the problem, though, and it's the problem that dogs almost every long-running comic property. Hun doesn't have one origin story. He has at least two distinct versions across the 2003 series alone, one rooted in the comics run, one in its animated adaptation, and they don't fully agree on what he is or what he wants. The comic version showed up first in that August 2003 issue and operated with a specific set of responsibilities. The animated version borrowed his silhouette and his attitude, but wrote him into a leadership role that the comic had yet to fully establish. That split matters because the animated Hun became the one people remember. He's the one with the purple dragon's helmet, the scarred face, the reputation that precedes him into a room. The comic version laid the groundwork in 2003, but the animated version gave Hun a personality that stuck. Aggressive, territorial, eager to prove he's the one who calls the shots in both organizations at once. Defenders of the 2003 series portrayal would point out that having Hun run a parallel organization while serving the Foot actually makes him more interesting than a standard enforcer. They're not wrong. A character who leads the Purple Dragons and serves Shredder simultaneously has narrative options a regular lieutenant never gets. He can betray, he can scheme, he can threaten the Turtles through two separate channels at once. That duality gave writers real storytelling room. But it also created a continuity problem that never really got cleaned up. The 2003 series gave Hun two lives, and they were never fully reconciled. When you stack the evidence, his comic debut in August 2003, his physical dominance among Foot humans, his brutal temper, his dual role as Purple Dragon's leader and Foot enforcer seeking expanded territory, the version of Hun that most viewers carry away is the animated one, even though the comic got there first. Toka. But at least Hun had an excuse for his scattered history. Toka arrived pre-scrambled. The Foot Clan kidnapped Professor Jordan Perry of TGRI and forced him to use ooze on a snapping turtle. The result was a creature the franchise would never fully decide what to do with. Toka is a mutant alligator snapping turtle with immense physical strength, able to bend steel with both his hands and his jaw, and he's listed among the Foot Clan's notable current members, which says something about how committed the organization is to keeping its most unhinged assets on the payroll. The 1987 cartoon gave Toka and Rahzar a level of intelligence that their film counterparts never reached. In Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, released in 1991, Toka made his first film appearance as a heavier, slower creature whose loyalty ran on simple conditioning. The 1987 cartoon version, voiced by Rob Paulson, could hold conversations, follow complex orders, and was noticeably sharper than the dimmer film iteration. That distinction between the two versions is the kind of thing that fragments a character's identity across a franchise. Toka in the 1991 film is one creature. Toka in the 1987 cartoon is someone else entirely, smarter and more articulate, more capable of loyalty, that looks like something other than obedience. What made Toka stick to the Foot Clan wasn't fear or programming, at least not entirely. A maternal connection with the Oroku family made Toka view Shredder and Karai as parental figures, and that framing didn't dissolve when Shredder died. Toka served and protected Karai afterwards, still seeing her as his mother. That loyalty, rooted in a creature that had been manufactured against its will, is the detail that cuts through everything else about him. A snapping turtle exposed to mutagen against its will, kidnapped from whatever life it had, subjected to experiments at TGRI through Professor Perry's coercion, and the loyalty it formed with its captors was real. Following Shredder's death, Toka remained with the Foot through Karai, continuing to serve and protect. The comics listed his species as a mutant snapping turtle rather than an alligator snapping turtle, a taxonomic correction that does nothing to diminish the image. The giant turtle who sees the Foot Clan as home, even though that home built him from stolen science and coercion, is the franchise's most honest symbol of what the organization actually does to everything it touches. Rahzar. Every Foot Clan member on this list shapes the Turtles' rogues gallery in their own way, but most appear once, do their damage, and vanish. Toka is one of those rare figures who got a full arc. Rahzar isn't just another mutant foot soldier, he's the one who keeps showing up across timelines while Toka stays locked in a single continuity, and that difference is the whole point. Rahzar and Toka are among the more notable mutants associated with the Foot Clan, their appearances marking significant turns in the rogues gallery. The Foot Clan does not reward sentiment, it exploits it. That line, delivered in a series that rarely paused for anything softer than a pizza joke, is the most human moment the 1987 Foot roster ever produced, and it comes from a mutant wolf. In the 2012 series, Rahzar is Chris Bradford, a martial artist who mutates into a wolf after working for the Foot Clan under Shredder. This version has a public identity, a real name, rank that actually commands respect, and a presence that extends well beyond the sewers. Rahzar meets his end in the 2012 series after a final confrontation, marking his exit from the Foot Clan story. Rahzar's different versions across TMNT adapt each aspect of his story and role within the clan to fit their respective narratives. Two takes on the same mutant wolf, two completely different endings, both of them definitive in their own way. The Foot Clan consumes its mutants the same way it consumes everything else. It promotes them as long as they're useful and abandons them the moment they're not. Rahzar exemplifies how Foot Clan members' stories often end abruptly, reflecting the clan's relentless nature. Bebop and Rocksteady. Rahzar at least got an ending, however unsatisfying. These two never even got that. They debuted in the TMNT universe as henchmen of Shredder, transformed from street gang members into mutant animals. Rocksteady a rhinoceros, Bebop a warthog. The origin story behind the origin story is more interesting than anything either of them did on screen. Their names come from genres of music. Bebop is a style of jazz, and Rocksteady is a Jamaican musical genre. Their first appearance was in December 1987 with their comic debut in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures #1 in August 1988. In the Archie Comics TMNT Adventure series, they remained henchmen of Shredder with similar mutated origins. It was at least a definitive endpoint, which is more than the 1987 cartoon ever gave them. The cartoon also introduced other mutant characters linked to Bebop and Rocksteady. In each version, Bebop and Rocksteady are transformed from human gang members into mutants for Shredder's service, Tigerclaw. That pair of mutant thugs caused localized damage, operating as street-level muscle with limited reach. Tigerclaw operated on an entirely different scale. He was the Foot Clan's second in command in the 2012 series, meaning every mission, every operation, every act of violence the Foot undertook ran through him before it reached Shredder's desk. He wasn't just enforcer material, and he was the organization's deadliest weapon. His position as chief assassin made him the Foot Clan's most lethal operative, handling targets wherever the organization required elimination. As second in command, he held authority over the entire Foot hierarchy below Shredder himself, giving him operational control of the entire organization whenever Shredder was absent or indisposed. That combination, top leadership and top enforcement, made him functionally the Foot's backbone. When Shredder died, the structure he'd built didn't just dissolve, it transferred. Tigerclaw became acting leader of the Foot Clan, stepping directly into the vacuum his boss left behind. The transition was clean, which tells you something about how much authority he'd already been exercising. A figure who only held a title wouldn't assume control so seamlessly. Tigerclaw's promotion wasn't a promotion at all. It was the formal recognition of power he'd already held. Here's where the story takes its most revealing turn. After Shredder's death, Tigerclaw didn't hold New York. He didn't attempt to consolidate power over the territory the Foot had spent years fighting for. He remained in New York and negotiated a truce with the Turtles while the rest of Shredder's forces departed the Foot Clan. Whatever loyalty bound those followers to Tigerclaw personally, it wasn't enough to anchor them in New York. The Foot Clan's hold on the city was situational. It existed because Shredder existed, and when Shredder died, the whole apparatus packed up and followed its acting leader out of town. That exit reveals something the series never needed to spell out. Tigerclaw's leadership was legitimate in the strictest sense the Foot Clan recognized. He had rank, he had authority, he had the loyalty of Shredder's inner circle. But it was never independent. It existed entirely within Shredder's shadow, and when that shadow lifted, the organization it sustained wasn't strong enough to stand on its own. The Foot Clan didn't break because it was defeated. It broke because its entire operational identity was tied to a single man, and when that man died, the structure he'd built evaporated rather than transformed. Karai. If Tigerclaw showed that Foot Clan authority could transfer cleanly across one man's death, Karai demonstrates that the entire framework of leadership the organization claimed to uphold was never coherent in the first place. She held a leadership role in the Foot Clan in the 2012 series, originally positioned as Shredder's second-in-command before later becoming the leader of her own faction. She wasn't subordinate. She was co-equal. Her position as second-in-command under Shredder sat alongside a status that existed independently of him. A leadership credential earned through clan hierarchy rather than appointment. And that independence is what produced the Foot Clan's most complicated internal conflict. She developed a complicated relationship with the Turtles that ultimately led her to break from Shredder and form her own faction of the Foot Clan. The detail researchers have circled back to repeatedly is that this wasn't a betrayal born of disillusionment or a defection born of disgust. She held legitimate authority within the Foot Clan, though her alignment ultimately shifted away from Shredder's faction. She was operating inside the Foot Clan's own power structure while working against its declared objectives, which makes her either a traitor by the clan's rules or exactly the kind of leader the clan's stated values actually produced. And before you say it was the Turtles' influence or her connection to Splinter that explains the choice, consider this. She made that alliance before the Turtles knew the full scope of what she was offering. The peace treaty she pursued existed as a Foot Clan internal initiative. It was clan politics, not ninja diplomacy. Her choices reflected a complex loyalty to the Foot Clan's broader interests that conflicted with Shredder's direction. The fact that the Turtles were the instrument doesn't change that the motive was clan loyalty to the clan's long-term existence, not to its current leadership. Karai is a notable current member of the Foot Clan, which is the most honest sentence the series ever wrote about her. She remained connected to the Foot Clan while forging her own path, ultimately leading a Splinter faction under her own command. Her story illustrates how the Foot Clan structure allowed for competing centers of authority. It was a coalition of overlapping claims, bloodline, rank, territory, personal allegiance, and the moment you acknowledge multiple legitimate sources of authority within one organization, the fiction that any single figure owns it falls apart. Shredder spent years insisting he was the Foot Clan. Karai's existence as co-leader proved he was just its loudest voice, and even that couldn't silence the others. Super Shredder. If Karai is the Foot Clan's razor edge, this is what happens when that edge is melted down and reforged into something that doesn't fit inside the word ninja anymore. Same franchise name, nothing about it remotely human. There's no elegant ascent, no strategic patience. In Season 4, Episode 20 of the 2012 series, bluntly titled The Super Shredder, the Foot Clan's leader makes a decision so reckless even his own scientist objects. When Shredder demands a mutagen injection for himself, Stockman warns him the procedure is untested and dangerous. That warning lands as nothing more than a formality. The transformation produces something barely contained by the name. Towering, muscle pulled taut over bone, spikes and blades protruding at angles the human skeleton shouldn't permit. A skull mask contorted into a face showing actual teeth, and a heart so enlarged it beats visibly against the outside. Splinter looks at the result and delivers the 6-word verdict, a monster both inside and out. The power this form commands is measured in objects, not opponents. Super Shredder hoists a van over his head with the casual weight of a barbell, swats the Shellraiser, a heavily armored vehicle, aside with one arm as though it's furniture, and ends fights through raw pressure rather than technique. Against Splinter, the attacks simply don't hold. Their duel produces a specific and deliberate cruelty. Super Shredder steps down hard enough to crush one of Splinter's feet beneath his weight. Then comes the promise, stated as plainly as an appointment. Once Splinter is gone, every person Splinter cares about follows. No limits, no honor, only total escalation. Even personal attachments get downgraded to bargaining chips. Karai vanishes into captivity, nothing more than leverage. Shinigami survives only because Super Shredder needs her alive to keep Karai compliant, and he makes the threat explicit. Tear her apart if Karai fights back. This isn't villainy operating within familiar bounds. It's cruelty that has simply outgrown the need for pretense. One vulnerability does exist, though finding it requires getting close enough to use it. The mutagen is unstable, described as the form's Achilles heel, and it means every explosive burst of strength carries a cost. Splinter knows this. The last stand between them takes place in the same underground chamber where Splinter previously broke the Rat King, ground he's already claimed, and he enters it knowing the only play left is mutual destruction. He detonates a bomb, betting the blast takes them both. The concept isn't original to this show. It's a mythology gag, a deliberate nod to the 1990 Secret of the Ooze film. Every version of this character since that movie has carried the same DNA, the scientist, the experiment, the loss of control, and the 2012 series doesn't break the pattern so much as make the metaphor literal. Becoming a monster means there's no one left at home. Every bond becomes a threat vector, every memory turns poisonous. Leader isn't even the word anymore. What remains is a walking vendetta, stripped of everything that made the person underneath worth saving. Oroku Saki, Shredder, you know his name. Unlike the mutated form just described, this one has never been rare or distant. He's present in every room the Foot Clan ever enters, the figure every other member answers to, the baseline threat everything else orbits around. The origin story with the most detail comes from the Mirage comics, and it begins with death rather than ambition. Abandoned by the Foot Clan as an infant, Oroku Saki is taken in by Hamato Yuta, leader of the Hamato clan, and raised as one of their own. He's sent to America with a specific brief: build up the New York branch, make it something the clan can be proud of. He doesn't just execute that mission, he transforms it, turning the big city outpost into his own personal domain and the Foot Clan into the organized force that shadows every corner of the city. The armor is genuinely terrifying. The blades, the masks, the layered suits, none of that is posturing. But concentrating on the hardware misses the actual source of his power. The founding, the command, the unbroken chain of decisions that bind everyone beneath him. That's what outlasts any single costume or form. The weapons are costumes. The real thing is older and harder to reach. Everyone defaults to the suits and gadgets and monstrous transformations because those are the things they can see and name. But those are just the hardware. Strip every layer away and what's left is the founding, the command, the structure of absolute control. The kind of power that doesn't need a reason to be present because it was never not present. The 2012 series gives you new layers, new wounds, new machinery, but the design doesn't change because the purpose never did. He was built to be the inescapable presence, the controlling hand, the enemy already in the room before anyone else enters. Oroku Saki doesn't just lead the Foot Clan, he is the reason it exists at all. Shinigami, Shredder kept the Foot Clan locked to one axis, his will, enforced by fear, with no structural redundancy underneath him. Shinigami operates in a version of the organization where that single axis has split into a hierarchy, and she sits at its second point, close enough to the center that every decision Karai makes without consulting her is a decision Karai is making with her absence in mind. That recontextualizes her entirely. She's not a specialist or a favored assassin. She's the person the Foot Clan's operations hinge on when the leader is unavailable, compromised, or negotiating with the Turtles. The character designer described her as a young witch allied with Karai's branch of the Foot Clan, and the description is precise enough to read as a job listing. The crescent blades and kusurigama she carries through every version of her design aren't decorative. They're the weapon system of someone whose primary function is disruption, the kind of fighter you deploy when you need confusion to land before the first blow connects. The witch hat is not an aesthetic flourish, it's a signal. Foot soldiers blend in. Shinigami stands apart exactly where a second-in-command needs to be visible. The IDW comics introduce her as the Foot Clan's newest recruit, which on its surface sounds like a demotion from the rank she holds elsewhere. But the placement in the narrative says otherwise. She enters with her weapons set intact. Witch hat, crescent blades, kusarigama, carried over wholesale from the animated series as though the comics are retrieving an operative already fully formed rather than constructing one from scratch. TMNT Num 17 teases an encounter between her and Clan Hamato, and that tease is doing specific narrative work. She's being positioned as the Foot Clan's representative in a confrontation that hasn't fully happened yet, not a random combatant who stumbles into it. Here's where it gets sharper. In the episode The Forgotten Swordsman, Karai and Shinigami team up with the Turtles to take control of the Foot Clan. That isn't a temporary alliance born of immediate mutual threat. It's a hostile takeover of the organization Shinigami holds second-in-command rank in, executed in partnership with the franchise's heroes, the people who've spent the better part of 4 decades trying to destroy everything the Foot Clan stands for. Shinigami doesn't hesitate at the alignment. She walks into it at the rank she already occupies, which means the decision to partner with the Turtles isn't Karai's alone. It carries her consent, her strategy, her stake in whatever version of the Foot Clan survives the restructuring. The facts force a plain conclusion. Shinigami isn't bound to any single leader's vision. She's committed to the institution itself, and she'll realign every alliance it holds if that's what protecting it requires. The Hypno Cat Witch label is a wrapper. The real instrument is the rank. Chrome Dome. The previous item was a human mystic embedded in Karai's personal faction of the Foot Clan. This one is a machine wearing its name. Chrome Dome is a robotic Foot Clan antagonist. In TMNT Shredder's Revenge, he is the final boss of episode 13 titled Technodrome Redux. General Traeg also appears as a boss in that episode, but Chrome Dome occupies the closing encounter, the last obstacle the player clears before the episode ends. His movement pattern reflects that placement. He fires missiles from his back while traversing the arena, closes distance with a rushing attack that forces the player off their position, and lands a short-range electrical discharge from his hands once he's in close. He can also leave the arena entirely and punch the Turtles off-screen, a mechanic that removes the fight from the player's control and demands repositioning before he re-enters. Foot soldiers accompany him throughout the boss fight, adding projectile pressure between his own attack cycles. The Mirage continuity complicates the name before the robotic version of it has even appeared. There, Chrome Dome is an epithet Leonardo uses for Lord Simultaneous, a passing descriptor, not a formal identity. The robotic Foot Clan antagonists in the games in the 2012 series and the label Leonardo attached to a Neutrino Lord in the original comics share a phrase that originated as throwaway characterization and hardened into something else entirely over time. A specialist would object that TMNT Shredder's Revenge is a licensed side project, not a primary continuity, and that Chrome Dome's boss mechanics therefore carry no weight in the broader canonical record. The 2012 series and the IDW comics both list him as a former Foot Clan member, a robotic operative who is part of the roster and is no longer, which frames him as a footnote, a piece of hardware the organization discarded rather than a figure who shaped it. That reading is defensible on paper. The facts behind it are the same ones that push back, a robotic operative designed with enough independent movement to leave the boss arena and attack from off-screen, equipped with missile systems and electrical discharge capacity, built to stand as the final encounter of a Technodrome mission. The Foot Clan, across every continuity where robotics plays a structural role, eventually builds something that wears its name and acts on its own. The epithet Leonardo coined for Lord Simultaneous eventually became the formal designation of exactly that kind of construct. The name didn't change. The organization underneath it did, and Chrome Dome is the proof. Claw Shredder. Chrome Dome crashed and burned as a hollow machine, a robot with all the hardware and none of the vision. Claw Shredder represents the opposite failure entirely. The 2003 series tried to solve Shredder's identity problem by building a better version of him from scratch, and the result was something that should have been his masterpiece, but ended up exactly as dead as Chrome Dome. The 2003 series categorizes Claw Shredder as a mutant Shredder clone. Listed by name alongside two similarly failed biological experiments, Shiva Shredder and Mini Shredder, all three listed as distinct clones in the Foot Clan member roster. The 2012 series inherited the concept but restructured it. The 2012 series Foot Clan rosters also includes Claw Shredder alongside Mini and Shiva Shredder. What's striking isn't that two separate continuities both killed him off, it's that the 2003 version didn't just build one Shredder clone, it built at least three, as if mass production was the solution to a problem that had no solution at all. Claw Shredder, Shiva Shredder, and Mini Shredder were not attempts to create something new. They were attempts to reproduce something that already existed, as though Shredder's original identity was a genetic sequence that could be extracted, copied, and refined through iteration. Each failure was filed under the same classification, each one marked with the same final status. 3 biological copies, 0 successes. And yet the program kept going, which means the failure was never really about the clones. It was about what Shredder thought cloning himself would actually accomplish. Chrome Dome failed because he was a machine programmed with no soul. Claw Shredder failed because he was a biological copy carrying the weight of an identity he could never actually fill. Both failures end up in the same category, deceased Foot Clan member, but the paths that got them there are completely opposite. One was too artificial, the other was trying too hard to be the real thing. Neither approach worked, and the pattern that nobody has ever answered is why Shredder, across multiple continuities, kept reaching for the same dead-end strategy. You can build a better Shredder in a lab, you can build one from alien technology, you can grow 3 of them as mutant clones and mark every single one deceased. But every version ends up exactly where Chrome Dome ended up, which raises the real question, what was Shredder actually trying to prove by building copies of himself, and why did he think the third attempt would work when the first 2 didn't? Chirel. Claw Shredder had the courtesy to fail quietly as just another deceased mutant clone. Chirel never fails quietly because Chirel isn't a clone, a mutant, or even a successor. He is the Shredder, in his most fully realized and unsettling form. In the 2003 series, Shredder is an alien named Chirel, a member of the Utrom race, operating under the public alias Oroku Saki, declaring himself the one true Shredder across every identity he inhabits. Unlike every other version of the character who simply assumed the mantle, Chirel re-established the Foot Clan in the present day under the identity of the Shredder, accumulating resources across centuries that most iterations of Shredder could never match. In present-day New York, he directs the local branch of the organization toward a single purpose: hunting down his arch-enemies, the Utroms, using an organization he built 1,000 years ago as his personal weapon. His armament includes the Sword of Tengu, and the connection between that weapon and Chirel himself runs deeper than any strategic advantage. The Sword of Tengu was forged during Chirel's re-establishment of the Foot Clan. That is not a design coincidence, that is a key cut for a specific lock, and the lock is Chirel's biology. And everything he has built over centuries of accumulated power was built to a scale that only a being with his kind of longevity and his kind of biology could actually operate. The Foot Clan in the 2003 series isn't just a criminal organization, it's a century-spanning weapon system calibrated to one alien-specific nature. After Chirel's defeat and exile in the 3rd season finale, Karai takes up the mantle of Shredder, but the organization she inherits was never built for anyone else. The Foot Clan's entire framework, from its ancient founding to its modern-day operations, was engineered around one being's specific nature across centuries of accumulated power. The Sword of Tengu wasn't forged for a ninja master, it was forged for Chirel, which means every institution, every hierarchy, every strategic resource that Chirel gathered across 1,000 years of deliberate accumulation was built for a Utroman armor, not for the human-shaped warriors who would later try to run it. That is the failure Karai inherits, and it's a very different kind of dead end than the ones Chrome Dome or Claw Shredder ran into. Defenders of the series point to Chirel as just another alien impersonating the Shredder identity, a body snatcher wearing a historical mantle he had no right to claim. But that explanation dissolves the moment you look at the timeline he's actually working with. The Utromian metal of the Tengu sword, the same substance as his armor, isn't coincidence. It's evidence of intentional engineering. The entire Foot Clan structure, from its ancient founding to its modern-day operations, was built around Chiarell's specific biology and his specific war. The organization wasn't designed to outlive him, it was designed to serve him, which makes the question of who inherits it after his exile something the series never quite answers. The Foot Clan was built for a destroyer of worlds. What it becomes without that destroyer is the question the 2003 series never fully resolves.